On day one of the Narendra Modi government, the new NDA government found its first controversy in the form of Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office, Dr. Jitendra Singh, saying that the government would work towards changing Article 370. Remember, this is part of the promise made by the BJP in its manifesto. They've got a full majority and therefore they can legitimately claim that this is part of the mandate that the people have already endorsed. But Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah has reacted furiously, saying any attempt to revoke Article 370 could lead to Kashmir separating from the Indian state. The first day and the first set of fireworks are already underway.
Just hours after Narendra Modi took charge as the Prime Minister, the Minister of State for the Prime Minister's office stirring a hornet's nest.
Article 370, as far as the political thinking of the new government goes, we are of the belief that it has done more harm than good to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. It has prevented the state of Jammu and Kashmir from reaping the kind of benefits that have been available to the other states of the country.
The controversial comment sparking a row immediately, with the Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister prompt to respond, stating that any talk of revocation of Article 370 was not only ill-informed but irresponsible. It wasn't long before a war broke out on Twitter, as the BJP and Mehbooba Mufti's PDP launched a scathing attack on Omar Abdullah. But Omar is not one to back down, slamming the PDP right back, alleging that they were the ones who worked to benefit the BJP in the state with a tacit understanding. Article 370 specifies that except for defence, foreign affairs, communications and ancillary matters, the Indian Parliament needs the state government's concurrence for applying all other laws. Thus, the state's residents live under a separate set of laws, including those related to citizenship, ownership of property and fundamental rights as compared to other Indians. A rethink on Article 370 was a poll promise of the BJP. And while the government can amend the constitution to facilitate the abrogation of this contentious article, it is going to be anything but easy. Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
Can the Narendra Modi government legitimately claim that since Article 370 was part of its manifesto, it now has the mandate of the people of India to amend or revoke Article 370? Joining us on the center stage face-off tonight on the first day and the first controversy that has emerged, we've got Colonel Rajyavardhan Singh Rathore representing the BJP, Tanveer Sadiq from Omar Abdullah's party, and Ashok Pandit, a Kashmiri Pandit, human rights activist. I want to go across first to Colonel Rathore. What exactly, sir, is the BJP's plan on amending Article 370? Now, this is part of your manifesto. Do you believe the thumping majority that the NDA has got, with your 336 seats as part of the NDA, 282 for the BJP, now gives BJP the right to claim that Article 370 can be pushed through because the people have voted for you and given the mandate to do what's part of your manifesto, and this is part of your manifesto and therefore you are entitled to change it?
The Prime Minister and the Bharatiya Janata Party as part of the government does not want to do anything through entitlement. I think running a nation and running it in the right direction, moving forward, taking all the people along the whole nation is much more important. And I say this because the first and foremost thing is to get an opinion built by the entire nation, by all the people. By taking everyone who's part of this movement, including the Kashmiris, including the leaders in Kashmir, including the rest of the nation, part of it. So I guess perhaps through this program, the youth and the people would know what exactly Article 370 is, and why did it come into being? And does it really help the nation move forward? Does it really help Kashmir in any way? That is of essence. That's
an interesting point. Because Tanveer Sadiq, the BJP can legitimately argue that Article 370 was part of its manifesto, a manifesto that's been endorsed by a majority of the people of India. They have a simple majority, and therefore what they're saying is that there should be a debate, let there be consensus forged. If they want to change it, can they argue legitimately, in your view, that they've got the mandate to change Article 370 now that they have a majority?
Rahul, who is shying away from debating Article 370? If you remember when Mr. Narendra Modi came to Jammu and in one of his speeches he said that we should have a debate on Article 370, Chief Minister Mr. Omar Abdullah was the first person to say, to invite him. And he went to the extent of saying that you choose the place and time and I'm here to debate. It's not about debating. We're never shying away from debating Article 370. What our point is that, Article 370 is the bridge between the union and the state. If you touch Article 370, you're opening the whole instrument of accession. Are you ready? Is the BJP ready to do that? I mean, you can only abrogate Article 370 by a presidential order, but that needs a concurrence from the Constituent Assembly. While as the Constituent Assembly does not exist, how will you do it?
Okay, I want to go across to Ashok Pandit, because the point that Omar Abdullah is making is either Jammu and Kashmir can be a part of India, or you can forget Jammu and Kashmir, scrap Article 370, in which case Kashmir will not be a part of India. Very dire warning coming from Srinagar to Narendra Modi. Do you think Omar Abdullah is overreacting, especially given the mandate the BJP now has?
You see, after the major defeat of National Conference in Kashmir in the recent Lok Sabha election, it's very natural of Omar Abdullah to react like this. And Omar Abdullah has never reacted in the most sensiblest way as far as Article 370 is concerned. None of the instrument of accession says that this clause was a permanent clause, number one. It was a very temporary thing, and it was planned, it was decided that it will be discussed and changed later on. It's a very temporary thing. Now coming to the realities of Kashmir, let us understand one thing, that if Omar Abdullah had thrown an open challenge to Narendra Modi, that come and discuss, this is what the Minister of Narendra Modi is saying. Jitendra Singh has said that we have got the majority wants 370 to be out. Kashmir 370 has been always used by the so-called politicians in Kashmir for a vote bank.
Why then is the response from Omar Abdullah so violent and so furious? I'm reading out Tanveer Sadiq from the BJP's manifesto. This is Chapter 3, Agenda for Institutional Rejuvenation, where the BJP says the BJP will abrogate Article 370 of the Constitution. Short and terse poll promise, a promise that's now been endorsed by the people. That's what the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office is asking for. Why is Omar Abdullah and your party targeting him and vilifying him in this fashion for saying what is only part of their manifesto?
Well, they had an NDA government before also. Why didn't they do it then? You cannot
They didn't have a mandate at that time. They didn't have a simple mandate. Now they do.
NDA had a mandate.
There's a difference.
If having a mandate is the base of argument. Let me tell you, in 1999 we had 2/3 majority. We passed a resolution of autonomy by 2/3 majority. We sent it to Delhi in the parliament. They put it in the dustbin. It was the BJP government. If mandates, if the full majority is the base of argument here, then we had
Tanveer Sadiq, you're confusing two issues. Is Ashok Pandit, Omar Abdullah being incorrect? Because they're two separate issues. You're saying NDA had a majority last time, but the BJP did not have a mandate, which was a full majority. Now the BJP, under whose manifesto this is contained, has a majority of its own.
Dividing the state between regions and religions. Dividing by saying that you abrogate Article 370.
Mr. Sadiq, you have already divided the state. By removing Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir, you have already divided the state. You have divided the state. Jammu, Mr. Sadiq, please mind your language. Mr. Sadiq, please mind your language. You please mind your language. I am talking with respect to you. So please mind your language.
I am also talking with respect, Mr. Pandit. You don't have to be Mr. so worked up. Don't be so worked up. I can understand where you're coming from with this.
It is you who have driven us out. It is because of you we are out of Kashmir. Jammu is suffering. Ladakh is suffering. Entire money which goes from India is only because of Kashmir.
Mr. Pandit.
Don't
play politics here.
Where is the entire money which is sent to Kashmir gone? You have nursed Kashmir and you have avoided Kashmir. So if you want to debate,
Mr. Pandit, let me
one by one. I don't like this business of people talking over each other. 1 second. That's not the way we like to conduct our debate. This is not the manner in which we would like. No, 1 second. I don't want both people speaking over each other because that's not good. I want to go across to Colonel Rajyavardhan Singh Rathore. I'm coming back to you, Ashok, in just a moment. Colonel Rathore, on the first day itself, the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office takes up this issue. Do you think even if a debate was to be initiated, it could have been waited for a while? The focus initially should probably be on governance, economy, jobs, growth. That's the primary agenda of Modi. Fix the economy first and then take up the more contentious issues. It almost seems as if the government is keen and the BJP is super keen on diving into the most contentious issues first. You do realize, of course, that while you've got a majority and can claim that you have the right to abrogate Article 370, there'll be consequences in Kashmir and you're an army man. You know the realities over there.
The minister was hardly getting into a debate. The minister just mentioned that the Bharatiya Janata Party and the Prime Minister wants a debate on it. Since he belongs to Jammu and Kashmir, and hence perhaps the interviewer or the journalist asked him this question, I entirely agree that this is time to fix the economy, and the Prime Minister is absolutely at it. International relations, the economy, everything is on top of the agenda. But let me just go back to the comment of Mr. Shah. It's pure semantics. There's a bridge between the Union and Jammu and Kashmir. Now, wasn't that bridge supposed to be temporary in nature? It was very specifically mentioned in the article as well, that Article 370 is of temporary nature. It is from Part 21 of the Constitution, which is of temporary nature. And therefore, in fact, even Nehru had stated very clearly that when he was faced with a lot of opposition because of this article, he said, "Ye ghiste ghis jayega." And now, a lot of people want this article to become a permanent feature. Now what is happening? A lot of important things like RTI is not applicable in Jammu and Kashmir. Anti-Corruption Act is not applicable in Kashmir. A lot of funds are being given by the government of India to Kashmir.
In the state of Jammu and Kashmir, sir.
There are, fair enough, there are few Supreme Court, the few regulations of the Constitution that the state of Jammu and Kashmir accepts on its own.
Jammu and Kashmir. What? See, I'll tell you.
It's very vague to say everything. It's just.
No, Tanveer Sadiq, I have a question. No, I'll tell you what the question is.
Go ahead, Rahul.
The moment Omar Abdullah says that Kashmir will secede, separate from India, if you want to abrogate Article 370, you foreclose the possibility of any debate. What Modi is saying, and you say Omar Abdullah is ready for, is debate. The moment a minister mentions, let's have a debate, you say Kashmir will secede. Either have Article 370 or have Kashmir. By threatening that Kashmir will burn or may secede, then you're foreclosing the option of any debate.
Okay, let's...
Rahul,
one by one. Ashok Pandit, I'm coming to you. First, Tanveer Sadiq. Yes, Mr. Sadiq.
Okay, let Mr... Okay.
No, you respond to my point.
Okay, Rahul, Jammu and Kashmir acceded to the Union on 3 things. Okay, and by virtue of that, Article 370 came into being. Now, if you are talking about the revocation of Article 370, you are reopening the instrument of accession. Are you ready to reopen the instrument of accession? And now, like my friend from the BJP said about the temporary phase, or Ashok Pandit said, it can only be done by the Constituent Assembly, which ceases to exist on 1956. So if it ceased to exist, how can you revoke it? I'm talking technical. I'm not talking about hearsay. It's technical here. How can you do that?
Okay, are you prepared to open the instrument of accession in the larger question of whether at all Jammu and Kashmir, Colonel Rathore, is a part of India? Because the moment you question the validity of Article 370, by its very nature, you raise that larger question of whether Kashmir at all is a part of India. That's the point that Tanveer Sadiq makes. How do you respond to him, sir?
Absolutely.
Absolutely not.
Okay, let Ashok Pandit answer that question. I'll just get Colonel Rathore back. Ashok.
Rahul, I just want to ask Mr. Sadiq.
No, answer my question.
On whose?
Is the BJP,
sorry,
are you prepared, Ashok Pandit, to open the very question of Kashmir's merger, integration with India? The moment you open Article 370 and start debating it, that too will be debated. Is Kashmir at all a part of India? That's the point that Tanveer Sadiq makes. How do you respond?
So what I'm trying to say is, let Umar Abdullah not pass a singular statement. In this debate, all the constituencies of J&K state should be part of the debate. The Kashmiri Pandits should be part of the debate. The Ladakis should be part of the debate.
Absolutely.
The Dogras of
Please
Jammu
answer
should be part of the
the
debate.
question that Mr. Rahul has asked you,
The
Mr.
Bakarwals
Pandit.
should be part of the
Don't
debate.
go here
It
and
should
there.
not
Just
be
answer
only
the
Umar
question.
Abdullah or Mufti Muhammad Sayyad
If you are
who
here
should
to
be a part
shout,
of the
then
debate. Let
what kind of a debate
Sadiq
are
Saab,
we
let me
having?
finish. Sadiq Saab, let me finish. It is Umar Abdullah
Okay, go ahead.
who has no right to open a debate. So what my contention is, if you want to debate on 370, then the debate should include all sets of people in J&K state. It should be Dogras, Pandits, Ladakis, Kashmiris, and all Bakarwals.
But is that not a
Everyone should
fair
be part
point,
of the
Tanveer
debate.
Sadiq,
And I'm quite-
that you need
and-
to look at Article 370 from the perspective of all stakeholders and not just those who occupy the Srinagar Kashmir Valley? You have to look at what the Ladakis feel. You have to look at what the people in
How
Jammu
do
feel.
you-
You have to
how
look
do
at
you
what the people
decide that
who
Jammu
moved away
people-
from Kashmir feel.
Rahul,
just one
how
second,
do you
Ashok.
decide
Let Tanveer
that
Sadiq
people
respond.
of Jammu
Sadiq,
or Ladakh are against us? How do you decide that people of Jammu or Ladakh are against us? It's an
I'll tell you,
integration. It's an
Kashmiri
instrument
Pandits-
of accession by the state with the union. You cannot challenge the constitution. Here we are talking about the constitution, not what Ashok Pandit or Tanveer Sadiq likes or dislikes. It's about the instrument of accession between the between the state and the center.
No.
I am saying, are you
No, but
ready?
you're
Is the
misguiding.
BJP ready to
You're misguiding.
reopen the instrument of accession? For the sake of argument, you
Instrument-
can have debates every
Let
time.
Colonel
We are
Rathore
not
respond to
shying away.
that.
We are
Let
there to
Colonel
discuss.
Rathore respond to that. Are you prepared to open the question of the accession of Kashmir into the Indian Union?
Mr. Tanveer has hijacked the debate onto the technicalities of the issue. It is just
Absolutely.
not that
Absolutely.
issue.
This is a
It is
tactical
very,
issue,
very
sir.
fair and simple. Fair and simple. At that point of time, the same format was signed by most of the states. It was only this special privilege that was given to Kashmir on a temporary nature.
This was a special
And that
state.
temporary
This was
nature
a
needs to be
special state.
decided.
It was
needs
not
to be
like any
debated
other
and
state.
decided
underlying
whether it needs
temporary.
to be taken away.
Kashmir,
There are a whole lot
Jammu and
of
Kashmir was
pundits who need to
independent
go
from
back to
15 to
Kashmir.
26
The youth
August.
of
Do you know
the youth
that?
of the state need jobs. Private investment needs to come into your state. And therefore, it needs to be debated
Nobody's coming there.
whether Article
state has to
370,
grow.
Article 370 is really helpful to the state or not.
The state has to
Manishankar
grow.
Iyer of the
And
Congress
there's-
Party is also
Rahul-
joining us on this broadcast now. I want to go across to Mr. Iyer. Mr. Iyer, do you think the BJP can legitimately argue on the back of a simple majority in Parliament that Article 370 was part of our manifesto? That manifesto now has the will and mandate of the people of India. Therefore, it's only legitimate that we raise this question of abrogation of Article 370. Mr. Iyer.
They're welcome to raise it, but they'll have to face the consequences of having done so. I have come very late into this debate owing to technical problems, but I did hear Colonel Rathore saying again and again that this is a temporary provision in the Constitution. Of course it is. But if he'll go back to the speech made by Sir Gopal Sami Iyengar explaining why Article 370 had been introduced, then he'd learn that this provision was put in because, unlike the other states of India, this state was invaded by foreign forces, and part of that state, a very large part of that state, is still in adverse possession, and therefore there are issues to be resolved which do not apply to any of the other princely states that acceded to India at that time. In the meanwhile, we have the Delhi Agreement of 1952 and the decision that Jammu Kashmir will have their own constitution, and that all laws of India, including constitutional amendments, will apply to Jammu and Kashmir if the State Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir agrees to have them apply. So there are a number of laws which the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly have accepted for application, and there are others which they haven't accepted. Now, what is the advantage that they think they can get by disturbing this order of things? I don't understand. But we will certainly do our best to prevent this kind of manifesto promise done unthinkingly being passed against the interests of India by a two-third majority.
You're saying, that's an important
both the
point
houses.
Mr. Iyer makes. What is the advantage to be had? This is a festering wound. It's under control to some extent. Rajyavardhan Singh Rathore, Mr. Iyer asks a very important point. You need to convince people if you want to build a majority and a consensus on why is it that you need to mess with it. It's part of your ideological agenda, but how do the people of Jammu and Kashmir benefit? And they have to obviously see the benefits if they're going to go out and support the abrogation of Article 370, Colonel Rathore.
Sure. And I just read it out now. Sri Gopal Swami Iyengar, while moving the bill for incorporating Article 370, had referred to Article 370 as an interim and transitional provision. Now, whatever has been debated here, it still remains that the Article 370, under whatever circumstances, was interim and provisional. Now, I do agree and accept that the education level in Kashmir is very high. However, the jobs and unemployment is very high as well. If you do not allow the private sector to come in, and they cannot unless they own a property there, then you will not create jobs for the people. Hospital, service sector, there are a lot of things that can be done there. Why should this state, from now getting a special status, move on to separatist status?
Okay,
Gradually,
Tanveer
all these
Sadiq,
youth,
integration
educated
will
youth are
allow
being
for
lured.
greater inflow of private
I absolutely
investment
agree.
into Kashmir, more job creation, better for the economy of Kashmir. How do you respond to the argument made by Colonel Rathore? Mr. Sadiq.
Colonel Rathore, unemployment is not only a problem in Jammu and Kashmir, it is a problem all over India right now. Number one. Number two, nothing is, Article 370 is not stopping the private sectors from coming here. There are many private sectors here. And let me just
They are not sure.
refresh your mind, refresh your
They are not
knowledge
sure,
right
Sadiq
here.
Sahab.
They can come here, they can do an agreement with the state government, and then they can start their private enterprises here. No, nothing is stopping them from coming here. Why don't you make us understand what is the harm? What is stopping anybody coming here? How is Article 370 stopping anybody from coming to Jammu?
Colonel
and
Rathore,
Kashmir?
you must respond.
It is-
because Rahul Gandhi went to
It's-
Kashmir,
it's
Omar
very
Abdullah was
simple.
there,
It's
all the
very
big
simple.
companies were invited.
All
Now
the
if those
top
companies
corporate
come or
houses
don't
have
come,
been here.
that's their choice. How does removing Article 370 make it
Yes.
easier for them to come to Kashmir?
No. Why won't private sector go there? Obviously, it's very easy for Mr. Sadiq to say that they are most welcome. They can have an MOU with the state government, but I'm
They
sure
have been
since it's
coming
difficult,
here.
that's why the
Colonel
private
Rathore,
sectors are not going
I'm
there.
so
Very
sorry,
limited.
but
He is welcoming us. The
But
way Sadiq is
unfortunately,
welcoming
I cannot
us,
agree
in a
with what
similar
you
way,
are saying.
they are welcoming the corporates also.
Mr.
way they are
Iyer,
welcoming us. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Iyer, I'm reading out from the speeches made by Gopalaswamy Iyengar, and the fact is, Article 370 was established for a transient temporary period. He says so constantly in his speeches. At some point in time, this question needs to be looked at. It couldn't be looked at so far because the NDA never had a majority, the BJP never had a majority. This is part of their agenda. Now they have a majority, and therefore they can claim, we have a majority, this is our belief. That belief has been endorsed by the people.
All of what Dr. Gopalaswamy Iyengar said has not been read out. Of course it's an interim provision. Of course it's a transient provision. But the explanation he gave in the course of that speech for making it at all transient and interim, bringing it at all, was fundamentally based on the fact that Jammu and Kashmir had been invaded by a foreign country, and that some of its territory, not a small amount, but a large amount of that territory, was in the adverse possession of a foreign power. And we were engaged at that time in trying to see how that aggression could be vacated. That aggression has not been vacated, and subsequent to his saying this, in order to get the Constitution of India applicable in Jammu Kashmir, there was the Delhi Agreement of 1952, following which they had their own constitution, which provided for the laws of India, the laws of the Union of India, as well as the provisions of the Constitution of India, to apply in J&K, subject to the J&K Assembly agreeing to this being done. And there is a huge body of legislation that does apply in Jammu Kashmir, because the J&K Assembly, which is a democratically elected assembly, has agreed to that application.
Okay, that's.
And it is
I have one
only
final
when
question for
the
Colonel Rathore.
conditions under which that transitional and interim arrangement was made
Before we end this,
fundamentally changed, that we can even begin considering what the
just
BJP
one second,
wants.
Colonel Rathore, this is a
Rahul-
very tricky, very controversial area. Now the BJP can claim it has the mandate to abrogate Article 370, but it will cause problems in Jammu and Kashmir. The separatists will try and fan the flames. A minority community would be
Rahul, can I
impacted. Just half
can
a
I just
second.
add to your question?
Colonel Rathore,
No.
do you think at a time when Modi has a huge amount of goodwill, he's riding a tsunami of goodwill, should the tricky and contentious issues not be kept for much later instead of be taken up on the first day itself, reinforcing the worst stereotypes?
Rahul, to add that, can I ask Colonel
yes,
Rathore
Mr.
another
Sadiq.
question?
I'm out of time also. Quickly.
No, just a second,
Okay.
just a second.
Just
firstly,
one
this
little
priority.
Just listen, he's adding
You're
on to my
asking
question.
the priority.
Colonel Rathore, he's
Prime
adding on to my
Minister's-
question and then answer it. Tanveer, quickly, I'm out of time.
Just one small little question. On one side, you invite General Nawaz Sharif to India, and you are here to talk about Kashmir and other issues. On the second, you are
What is that to do with
weakening
it?
the relationship.
Okay,
what is
Colonel Rathore,
what is the
respond.
similarity? No, what is that to do with this?
How?
What
does
Musharraf to do with
politics are you
Kashmir?
playing here?
I
Could you
refuse-
just answer that?
No, what does
I
Musharraf
refuse
to do with
answer
Kashmir?
that.
Okay, Ashok Pandit, let
I
Colonel
refuse
Rathore
to answer
respond.
that. That's really no point. The point, I said I refuse to answer that point. That's really pointless.
Of course
Coming
you
back,
will not. Of
what
course you will not.
was just stated, the terrorism, the issue of terrorism is perhaps continuing because we are not looking at Jammu and Kashmir in the right manner. This needs to be
Absolutely.
debated. An opinion needs to be built in the entire country. And if getting the pundits back, getting higher investment into Kashmir will create a positive environment in Jammu and Kashmir, then perhaps we need to go for removing Article 370. And the very first instance for asking for a debate brings on a response from the Chief Minister in
Okay,
such a violent
I'm going to
manner.
leave it over there.
This
There are
is what is of
points,
essence.
because both
Rahul,
parties
one
are
sec.
playing to the
Rahul.
gallery, trying to
Rahul,
push only
Rahul,
their
one sec.
agenda. Of course, there must be a debate. Now that the BJP has a simple majority, it can legitimately claim that there must at least be a debate on whether Article 370 should be abrogated, and also over-the-top statements which suggest that Kashmir will secede from India if Article 370 is revoked. That doesn't really create fertile grounds for any debate. There must be a debate. The people of Kashmir must be convinced that removing Article 370 serves their purpose as well. Otherwise, why would they agree to it? And if they don't, would it not reinforce worst stereotypes in Kashmir? That matter needs to be looked at very, very delicately, and maybe the first day was not the right opportunity for the new Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office to take this up. He's of course now retracted, not from the comment, but just distancing the Prime Minister from his comment. But he's the Minister of State in the Prime Minister's office, therefore can't say that he doesn't reflect the will of the BJP at a time when this is part of their manifesto. Manishankar Iyer, Colonel Rajyavardhan Singh Rathore, Ashok Pandit, Tanveer Sadiq, thank you very much for joining us. There must be a debate, and strong arguments must be put out on both sides, and then all stakeholders together must decide whether or not at this time is it the right thing to do or not. That's where we end Center Stage tonight. Look forward to seeing you at 9:30 p.m. tomorrow evening.